What is up, YouTube? My name is Alex. Welcome back to the Lifting Nomad. And over the last year, I guess I spent 6 months in South America, from Colombia, Peru, Mexico, Uruguay, Argentina. And in this video, I want to talk about my experience being a single person as a foreigner traveling through these places and what the dating scene is looking like. Is it safe? Can you use dating apps? Where's the best place to meet locals? Where's the best place to meet expats? All of that good stuff. So without further ado, let's get into this video. All right, so I think when it comes to dating internationally, there's always going to be a little bit of challenges depending on where you are, what the language speaks, what the culture is, what the influence is of things like dating apps. Obviously here in North America, Canada, the US, dating apps are extremely popular ways that people are meeting each other and becoming partners and becoming potential hookups, potential dating, whatever that looks like. Using it a lot of the time, and now it's not nearly as taboo whatsoever to use things like Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, probably being the biggest three. I guess Grindr probably has a fairly big role in there as well, that are extremely common for people to meet each other. Now, that being said, typically, in South America, there is different etiquette when it comes to the dating apps, different popularity depending on where you are, what people are using, which languages you speak. Do you look like a foreigner? Are you from those countries originally, but then you potentially migrated or something like that? It's all going to affect your experience being on these dating apps. So a couple things straight out the gate. My experience, was a combination of using dating apps, meeting people at bars, meeting people at language exchanges, I guess even like digital nomad meetups too. So quite a few places I was actually getting, engaging with people and becoming friends and becoming potential partners and going on dates from these places. So my experience is going to be a little bit biased towards what I've done. If you're someone who is really actively going out and just meeting people through sports or through activities or clubs or whatever that is, it may not be the exact same experience as me. So I just wanted to preface that with what I do to meet people, because that's essentially the same thing I do here when I'm at home. So that's obviously what I did when I traveled. Now, for me, I think there's, a couple things to be aware of, especially in talking about places like Colombia, where people say it's not necessarily safe to use dating apps there. Reason being, it's very common for foreigners to go on things like Tinder, match with a local Colombian girl who is, substantially out of your league. You go on a date with her to a restaurant, maybe you speak Spanish, maybe you don't, you're just using Google Translator, and there's actually a fairly decent chance that that is someone who's trying to exploit you and take advantage of the situation. And unfortunately in Colombia, that comes down to using a drug called scopolamine, which the idea is you essentially get drugged on this date, but the thing is, it doesn't pass you out, it just makes you very suggestible and easily manipulated. So what the common thing is that you go on a date with this person and they'll just slip it in your drink when you're not watching. Maybe you go to the bathroom, maybe you order a drink and they very quickly do it. Or they, even worse, I've seen where they actually are in some sort of relationship with one of the bartenders or servers, so you don't even ever see it because you've ordered your drink and then someone else who's working at that establishment is working in tandem with the girl you're on the date with. Maybe they've suggested that restaurant, suggested that bar. You get drugged and you wake up 3 days later and all your shit's gone. Your apartment's been stolen, your MacBook's gone, your phone's gone, your wallet's empty, all that. Even going as far as taking foreigners to an ATM and getting them to empty their entire bank account out and give it to these people because you're so easily suggestible in this state. So with that being said, anytime I've had friends go to Colombia, I personally just recommend never using Tinder. I don't think you should use Tinder anywhere in South America if you are a foreigner, just because there is a non-0% chance that something like this could happen. I'm not saying don't ever do it, and it's not people haven't had success with it in the past, but from my experience and what I know and what I've seen, I just don't think it's personally worth it. I would much rather meet local people in the sense of a language exchange. A lot of these major cities, if you're somewhere I've done this in Medellin, in Bogota, in Buenos Aires, in Cordoba, Lima, I guess I did this as well. So, anytime you're in these major cities, they're going to have events where you can go do language exchanges, which is essentially you sit down in usually a bar, and you sit down at a table or you wear a sticker of the countries you're from or the languages you speak, and you essentially practice your language with those people. Now, this is a great way because first of all, you're gonna meet people in person, which you can always use your gut instinct and a little bit more of body language and how they're reacting to what you're saying, and are they sketchy, are they there with friends, are they there by themselves? You just get a better vibe of what they're actually looking to do, and then you can actually also get to know them a little bit better. Usually if they're at a language exchange as a local, it means they're likely trying to improve their English That way they're able to get better jobs, potentially move to somewhere in North America, something like that. So it's actually, with positive intentions versus on Tinder, a lot of times, these dates where it goes awry, it's pure ill intentions. This is someone who's just out of your league, taking advantage of people who don't know any better, or people who are just a little naive to think that they should be going on these dates with these beautiful Colombian women. So what I would always do is typically look up places when I'm going to find a language exchange or find a digital nomad meetup. And that's going to essentially open you up to two categories of people. I think the language exchanges, you're going to have essentially, I think, very similar type of people as you would to the digital nomad meetups. I find that through Facebook groups or WhatsApp groups for the cities that I'm staying in. And you're going to have essentially two groups of people. You're going to have tourists or travelers like yourselves who are going there to learn the local language. And then you're going to have locals who are there likely to learn the foreign language, whether that's English or whatever they're practicing. But sometimes even at these digital nomad meetups, you have locals who are going there to meet people who are traveling and visiting their city. I mean, I think it's a really cool thing. Even if I was here in Toronto and I could go to a place where I'm meeting people who are traveling here to potentially work, I think that's really cool to meet people outside of your normal circles. So I'd experienced doing both of those things, and I think the best is a language exchange because it's always such an open floor of conversation where anyone who's there likely it's a language exchange. The whole purpose is to exchange communication, exchange language with others. So that would be my absolute number one thing to recommend if you are looking to meet locals. It also tends to be in a bar where you're able to, to be honest, get a couple beers, and it just takes away a little bit of that social anxiety. So there's typically a better vibe in those places. And they're also often in really popular local downtown spots. So it's easy to go in there and just do your thing without being too stressed. Now, if you are really passionate about using dating apps and you want to get into that, personally, when I travel, I almost exclusively use Hinge. And the reason being, Hinge is actually only available on the app stores of Canada and the USA, and I believe some European countries. So let's say I'm in Argentina or Mexico or Colombia, whatever, and I see someone on Hinge. Those countries, the local people, if they go on the local app store for Apple or any of their devices, it's simply not available to be downloaded. So what that means is if they have it on their phone, so if you're matching with someone on Hinge, it means they've either traveled outside of the country, then downloaded it, and then came back with it, which you can use it in these places. You just can't get it in these places. Then that's okay, maybe this is someone who's traveled for work, or is again, a digital nomad, remote work, or something like that. And they've actually, been to these countries for a little bit and then came home. Or alternatively, a lot of the times it's people who have been born in those countries, maybe grew up as a child there and then moved to the USA, moved to Canada, whatever, and then they're now back. Maybe they got a good job in the US and now they're working remote back at home. That's happened to me a few times. So they're actually really, really good people to go on dates with or can become friends with even because they speak the local language. They're probably born there. They probably have a local friend group that you can become introduced to, and then just overall they're gonna have restaurant recommendations, bar recommendations, that kind of thing. So it's actually a really nice way to meet people. So what I will usually do is if I'm going to a city for longer than a couple of weeks, let's say a month minimum, I'll set my Hinge location to that city typically 2 or 3 weeks before I get there, start swiping through and try and get a few conversations going. And it doesn't always have to be romantic. I think the best friend I ever met was while traveling was actually from a Hinge date in Buenos Aires. We went on a coffee date. Obviously, we were vibing as friends, but there wasn't really a romantic interest. So we ended up becoming really, really good platonic friends, traveled to Uruguay together. And then this winter when I'm going back down to BA, we're gonna be meeting back up. So I think it's important to, not just be thinking about romance and meeting these people and hooking up or whatever. But of course you can always make friends at home or abroad while just going on dates. Now, I guess the second question and the follow-up to this is, what do you do after you've met someone, whether that's via a dating app or through a language exchange or through a nomad meetup, or you joined a sports league in that city, whatever it is, and what do you do with them? Well, I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to figure out, but likely go to a coffee shop, go to a bar for a drink, go grab some food, go grab some lunch, go sit in the park with a bottle of wine. These are all things that I would typically do at home, so I don't really change my dating approach to how I would actually do it. I do think if you're matching with someone on Hinge and you've never met them before, I would say Hinge or Tinder or Bumble, whatever you're using, I would usually recommend meeting that person the first time during the day, maybe like go for a lunch or like an afternoon drink on like a weekend, or even during the weekday if a lot of people aren't working very hard or aren't working at all when the time they're there. Reason being, it's obviously a lot less likely that something's going to go poorly if you're during the day. There's going to be people around, there's going to be like police likely out. It's not going to be as like sketchy. So no matter which city you're in, it's just going to be a lot easier to feel comfortable in that. And then at that point, you should be able to get a judge of maybe what their character is, feel out whether this is like a positive interaction you want to keep going with, or it's something you just want to say, you know, adios, hasta luego. But I think that's generally what I would recommend. And then after that, of course, it's really up to you. If you want to take them to a nightclub, take them to like a movie theater, take them, I don't know, on like an excursion on a boat if you're in like a harbor city, something like that. Like you know, obviously you have a lot of options depending on what your style and what your budget is for that approach. I do think also it's worth mentioning hostels are a great way to meet people to potentially go on further dates with. The only caveat with this is oftentimes hostels are very transient people who are there for a short amount of time, for like a week to 2 weeks, or even just a couple of days in that city. So it's often not as, you know, romantic as like, let's go, you know, let's potentially have like a few dates in a row and like work through this thing. It's usually just going to be like 1 or 2 days. Let's go out for one night, probably get drunk, and, you know, see what happens. So it's just worth mentioning that that's kind of the approach you would think about that's the approach that I think about when I meet people in hostels. So hopefully this was useful. This is about my experience. Obviously this is going to be, you know, different from everyone else, but I think it's worth talking about as a lot of people are planning to travel more and more to South America. There's a lot more chances for remote work and digital nomads. So I think it's important to be prepared and be safe about what you're doing. So wanted to share my experiences as, you know, a very white looking person who's been to some of these places that necessarily aren't that safe. So hope this was useful. If it was, feel free to leave a like or a comment section below. Always helps the algorithm. But as always, my name is Alex. Welcome back to Lifting Nomad. We'll see you next one. Peace.